When you have to shoot, don't talk.
All right, welcome to the Trap House Podcast, everybody. This is episode 19, and we've been away for a while. We took some time off for the holidays. Took a month off. Just been super busy at the shop and trying to trap, and it's just really hard to sit down and take the time to put these podcasts together. But we made some time for this one. This is a good little discussion between myself, Charlie Mashek, Jake Mashek, and his good buddy Zach Whitaker, which we invited out to help us do some filming, which we'll get into that. But we just got done with trapping in Arkansas and kind of sharing our experiences out there. But before we jump into that, we always got to give it up to the sponsors that help keep this going. J3 Outdoors, glad to have you. He's the maker of the Hags Bracket. That's j3o.com. Check out his website. Not just the Hags Bracket. He's got several other products there to check out, and all are quality. So give them a look up on j3o.com. Also, got to give it up for the Top Lot Stretcher Company. Their website is toplotstretcherco.com, and they sell trapping supplies and first shed tools, that sort of thing. But I'm really impressed with their quality adjustable stretching boards. So check them out. Give them a try if you haven't. If you're looking for something new to try out in your first shed, you might want to look them up. That's toplotstretcherco.com. And, of course, HoosierTrapperSupply.com. We got everything you need, from starter packages to lures, baits, starter kits, whatever, DVDs. We got it covered. Charlie's got you taken care of, and we'll gladly help you over the phone or online at HoosierTrapperSupply.com. So thank you to the sponsors. And one last thing I want to mention, we get into a couple discussions here on this podcast, and Charlie just wanted to clarify about a section that we talk about. It was late at night, so he just wanted to clarify some things. So be sure to sit through the entire thing, and at the tail end of it, he kind of makes sure nothing's accidentally, taken out of context or whatnot. So, but thanks for having us. Let's get going. All right, thanks for joining us for another Trap House podcast. We are in a beautiful, what is this, Charlie? A Days Inn, or I don't even know what it is. It's terrible is what it is.
Yeah.
We actually just been moved to another room, but that's a whole nother podcast within itself. But we've had fun on this trip. There's more. We have an extra guy with us here. There's Charlie, Jake, and myself as usual. But Jake's good buddy, Zach, here. He has joined us for the first time to help do some filming. Zach, you want to give us a little intro, what you do for school, and why we brought you? Not just because we like you, but...
Sure. Well, I've kind of been doing some video stuff with you guys for a couple years, taking video production at IUPUI. Been at school with Jake for a few years, so it's been cool to get involved with it. I've seen quite a bit since you guys asked me to film at the 7B event, so I think I've learned a little bit about it, but this being the first time trapping, it was a good experience to get to do some video stuff as well as learn about the actual trapping, and then, just to be around it for a week. It was pretty cool.
It's awesome. Glad to have you, too.
And he had never set a trap before this trip either.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was... Really, when we started, I was surprised that I hadn't, just because of the 7B stuff. I've seen, a lot of people set traps, and I just haven't, and didn't realize that until we did this, and just to really figure out how you guys do it. I mean, there's so much to it rather than, you think you just go out there and catch animals, but there's a lot to it, and I was excited to learn about that.
So a couple things. One, the 7B event is Fur Takers Chapter 7B, fall rendezvous that we have at Hoosier Trapper Supply. So... and Zach's helped in the past with some of the video highlight reels that we've done for that event, and those are available on YouTube. You can watch them. Some of them are actually on the Hoosier Trapper Outdoors show that we've used, just some highlight footage that for the most part he filmed, mainly because because that's what he does. Plus Justin's usually so crazy that can't do anything else that day. In
Crazy
that
busy,
regard.
not crazy mentally.
Yeah.
Well, kind of both.
That's
but
very debatable.
that's
So-
fine.
So to go back to the trip,
It was a good one.
it was a good trip. We had actually kind of thought we would be going to a different state through another guy, and that kind of fell through to a certain point.
Yeah.
So we just decided we'll just go back to our old stomping grounds in Arkansas. This is our 9th time that we've been there, so we've got quite a history with this place, which is nice to have that kind of in your comfort zone, essentially, because you know what to do, where to go, where to set, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You've learned over the years. But the other side of it is I always enjoy new geography and trying to figure that out. So obviously we don't have that edge to it when you go back to the same
Right.
place. But
Well, out of the 9 times you talked about, we've kind of bounced around within Arkansas out of those 9, but probably about a good half of them were probably on the property that we were actually trapping this trip.
actually, we've been on this property 9 times.
This certain, really?
Mm-hmm.
What, we just added additional to it? Because I
Yeah.
know there's other
Yeah, there was-
areas we just didn't make it to.
There was a couple years that we took a second trip to Arkansas on different properties.
That's right.
But there's been nine different years we've been on this same property.
Man,
So
time's flying.
yeah,
And they've all been good, so to speak.
I
I
mean-
mean, considering when you lay out, like last season, we had terrible issues with weather, and we were still able to catch some stuff for the most part.
terrible rain last year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then we had one year several years ago where there was so much snow in the mountains down here, even on the flat ground, but there was so much snow we didn't have 4-wheel drive at that time, so we couldn't maneuver the hills and stuff, and so we went to a different property, different part of the forest, national forest, and then as the weather got better, we worked back to where we were at on this trip and kind of worked with both properties. But so yeah, I guess within the property that we're on, there's kind of like 4 different legs to it, and it's basically from the first trap to the last trap, we're at 60 to 63 miles. So it's all in national forest. So all of that we can trap, and we have traps spread out over that distance. So we're running like 50, I think it was 53 or 54 location stops, and then usually we put 2 traps per location. So I think it's 53. So we're in different home ranges of animals. We're in different groups of animals, and we have noticed over the 9 years that we've been there that the different areas or different legs of that line, and a leg, we're just kind of using that loosely. Say we'll just run the length of one Forest Service road, and then we'll basically just jump and go on a completely different road and run to the end of that, and then we'll flip to a different road. So that's how I'm referring to like legs within the trap line. So there's like basically 4, and I've noticed over the years that one will be better than the others, and this year certainly one was better than the others, and one was disappointing, as compared to the past. So, and I'm not sure really what causes that. If there's just the way the animals are in their range or how they've moved, or I don't think it's because there's other trappers here. I mean, there's other trappers here, but not.
Yeah. There's not. I mean, there's pressure, but nothing that would affect it to that level.
Right.
What's interesting too, I've noticed like some of the fire lanes that we would always trap early, like in the first few trips here, to now they look totally different. Those short little knee-high pine trees are now well above our heads.
Oh yeah, they went from 5 foot to now they're 15 or 20 feet, in some cases taller.
And I wonder how that changes over time, the pattern movements of animals to switch to maybe a smaller shrub area where there might be better prey animals.
Right.
Well, that in areas that have been burnt. So
Right.
all the underbrush and stuff like that's gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely changes.
Right. And with it being a national forest, it's multi-use. So there's a lot of logging going on, and then they replant. So it'll be complete clear cut, basically, which is great for wildlife habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they plant everything back, and then, it's selective. So that's going to change things, too, over time. I think the significant thing this year that I didn't anticipate at all, I know none of us did, is we just didn't catch any gray fox. So in the 8 check days we had,
we caught 2.
We caught 2,
but
which we typically catch 10, 12. We've caught more than that in the past here, but generally we can count on catching normally 10 or 12 gray foxes. And gray foxes, for those of you that have trapped them, are notorious for messing with your trap, digging at your trap, pulling your pan cover, digging. That's just the way they work a trap.
That's one of the main reasons why I got at least when we come down here, I use wax pan covers versus the screens that we always used to use. Which at home it didn't seem like near the issue because we don't really have the grays. I mean, the coons will get into them a little bit, but I think that kind of helped making that switch for sure. But still,
right. That's why we switched to those. So, and then this trip, we had some of that, but not like in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It was always proportionate to the catch. So if you were having several traps messed with, you were going to catch several grays. Well, we just had a handful of sets that were kind of messed with, and we caught 2. So I don't know if they diseased out, because we're talking everything is the same essentially for this 9-year pattern that we have. So we've trapped the same areas, the same time of year, the same attractant as far as bait, lure, urine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything, no significant change in any of those variables. I mean, they're pretty much the same.
Right.
So, so I don't know if it was a disease issue or a lot of them died off from disease.
Was there a few seasons? I mean, you recall things better than I do, but wasn't there a few seasons early on where we weren't really catching that many coyotes? Or am I just thinking wrong? I feel like we always caught more grays than coyotes there for a few seasons.
I think we usually catch more coyotes, or I know we do. Maybe at the very beginning, it might have been just our lack of... When we first started trapping in the National Forest, we were...
we're doing a lot of experimenting.
Well, and we were hesitant to set like we do now. In other words, right on the Forest Service Road, right on... we were afraid to set where you should set.
Right, because due to theft and people messing with your sets.
Right. And we finally got to the point where it's like, the heck with it. If we're going to catch critters, you got to be on these roads.
Right.
Albeit they're not traveled much, and like today and yesterday, I don't think we even saw a vehicle or anybody in that 62 miles or whatever. So, we just don't run into people. So, anyways, we're setting. I think that's the reason our coyote catch has gone up.
Just getting better.
Just because we're in the locations where you have to be to catch them. So,
I think that's something that surprised me was how much you guys stayed in the truck. Stuff was close to the road. When I pictured coming down here, I thought it was going to be a lot of hiking, going into places, trying to find where the coyotes are, and it was like, we were in the truck a lot of the times, and your reasoning was it's the least stressful, least amount of brush for them to go through, so that's the path most traveled. And I mean, it really surprised me as to, I don't know if it was a lot of time in the truck, but to me it just seemed easier that, like, hey, we can get out, walk 50 yards, 20 yards, 10 yards, and that's where we're going to set traps, and it was successful. I think that was the biggest thing that surprised me. It was along the pathways. It wasn't trying to dig deep in the woods to find out where they're at. They're right there on the road. I mean, they're traveling the easy route too, just like us.
Right.
So
then that just makes it great for us to be, as far as being more efficient, because we can park.
And the mileage that we had, I would have pictured a couple of miles of traps coming down here, and then when it ends up, it's close to 65 miles. I mean, that was pretty surprising to me just to know you went that. I mean, I really, honestly, I thought it was only a couple of miles. A lot of walking and a lot of stuff was close by, but I guess when you have 108 traps, you got to, spread it out and find a lot of spots rather than just being close to one area.
Right. What do you say?
It's good to have your point of view on this podcast. It's good for beginners because they don't, they really don't think that far ahead at the time. At the time, they're really thinking about what's the best bait and lure and the best trap in the world that's gonna make me catch. They're not thinking about the big picture stuff that kind of gets over their head.
I mean, location is key. So
big time, yeah.
You know what? Well, this is kind of interesting. We ran. There was of that 62, 63 miles, whatever it is that we ran. There was only a 2 mile back track. So we went to a dead end road and back out. So it's 2 miles in, 2 miles out, and that was about the only place that we thought or think we ran into another trapper, because he had pink flags on that road wherever he had a trap. I don't know, and they were all new. They showed up while we were there, and they were still there when we left. And I mean, we had a trap that was clearly, Justin had it all tinseled up for a bobcat, and
very festive.
You'd have to be blind. Yeah, you'd have to be blind not to see it. He didn't bother, and we didn't bother his stuff, and we didn't. So we're assuming he was trapping the way everything was marked, and he had him just every few yards, and essentially, and on that 2 miles, he probably had, I don't know, 18 sets made out or whatever. But anyways, so that's okay. It's just not productive, and it's just not efficient. And if he was setting the locations that he did, and he wasn't on the road, and I don't think he was. He's
probably having a hard time.
He wasn't putting traps.
I don't know.
He wasn't putting traps where the animals were traveling.
Yeah, it was almost like close to what we were doing the first year. It just wasn't productive.
We were still spread way out.
Yeah, we were
more.
spread out, but as far as walking in places and stuff, it's just
yeah, because a few of those spots did look like they made sense because there'd be like a drainage coming off the side of the mountain or whatever. Right. But then there wasn't. There were some that weren't. It was just like he went up the side of a random hill.
It was super random.
But
so I mean, Zach, if you notice too, if we weren't directly on a road, we were on a 2-track. I mean, where they were like 2-track road or whatever from some sort of equipment or something. So we were always set on some sort of path of travel. No random.
Getting back to like how we were so spread out, I think the first couple of days we noticed that the first fourth or third of our trap line was almost nothing. I mean, we didn't see hardly. And I just thought to myself, hey, if we would have gone in this few miles, we may have not got anything this week. Just the fact that we spread out so much, you had a variety of types of locations, types of traps, and it just seemed like the back end was pretty heavy. But later in the week, the front end it seemed like
got
just
a little better.
Yeah, it picked up.
So it definitely paid off, the fact that we had that long of a line and just kind of seeing what you guys do. I mean, it's crazy how much goes into it. The fact that you guys it would teach me along the way, and we're in the truck, why this location's so good, why this is a little bit different than the last spot, and why this is appealing. I mean, it's a lot. As a beginner, you would never think about it or think it's that important.
Well, and there are a lot of areas that we have set in the past for multiple years and wouldn't catch anything, so we knew that, hey, we might try to check something else out instead of that. And you only get that from experience, trapping the same area for 9 years or whatever it is.
Well, I think late in the amount of traps that we were setting, I kind of got an idea of that looks good. I started to get a feel for why that was a good spot, and maybe we had success in a spot that looks similar to that. And it started to make more sense as to, I mean, you guys' reasoning on some of the paths and what kind of vegetation was around that made them good spots.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that has always appealed to me about this particular trip and some of the others we have been on is that we are on one giant piece of property, one giant national forest that has endless possibilities, essentially, and has you can set traps basically the entire time you're in the truck, and you're not going from property to property like we do around home. So you go from farm to farm, and you might drive 10 or 15 minutes between farms or whatever. So here, there's no 10 or 15 minutes that you can't. I mean, we might drive 10 or 15 minutes, which I don't think we do. But if we did, you can still set traps in that 10 or 15 minutes. You don't have to, so that's one of the really appealing things about having this giant resource available to us to trap, is that we're on it and we can go and we can set traps wherever we want. And since we bought that Onyx chip for the GPS, most of the private ground is very well marked, because those people want to make sure that there's, they got their protected hunting ground or their home property or whatever. And there's very little of that you even have to be concerned about. But since we bought that Onyx chip, then, there's no doubt what's private, what's public. And it's all public, basically. You very rarely actually even need to check it. But that, and we ran into that in New Mexico last year with the private ranch that we had. And to be honest with you, the ranch was 52,000 acres, and that's a different podcast and a different story. But just to put it in perspective, that's such wide open country. The 52,000 acres, we actually burned through that fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And wasn't we could have used more ground, really.
Right. And then the road access, you had your main roads that go through, but not a lot of cutoffs and things like that.
Right. And some of it was so rough that, you do, when we're on a trip like that, we do have to get our vehicle back to our home state. So some of it's like, we're just not taking the risk of driving that every day. If you want to check something out and it's rougher than you typically would want to drive in, that's one thing. But to consider that you got to drive it every day if you set traps, then, do you want to do that to your vehicle when you realize that you're going to have to drive it home in a few days? So, anyways.
Speaking of vehicle damage, Jake did have to get down and work on some brake pads, and we're going to have to get some rotors on when we get home.
Yeah, the truck's going to need some attention when we get home. It started squeaking bad, and
because the brake pad was gone.
Yeah.
If you think about the thickness of a brake pad, it was completely eliminated.
Metal on metal. So, auto parts store in town where we're staying, and they didn't have any loaner tools, so we had to buy a socket set. Next time we are bringing that type of stuff with us. We should have known better. We just kind of spaced it. But.
Part of the adventure. So Charlie, do we have a final count of what we caught? Have we said that yet? I think we had roughly 19 coyotes.
5 cats?
5 bobcats, and 2 gray fox, a couple coons, and
2
few
coons
possums.
So statistically, if you think about it, it's like if we had done that same effort in Indiana, it'd be crazy the catch.
Oh yes, I've always said that. But if we had a block of time to actually do that and line up every single farm that you just talked about, just trying to line that much ground up, we'd have to probably get some help skinning.
It's not even fathomable to think about. For one thing, we don't have that much time available, at home. Anyways, but if we had put that kind of effort in Indiana, the catch would be much larger. So we don't have the animals per square mile here that we do in farm country.
Right.
So it's a different kind of trapping for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the enjoyment of it. So
we got we trapped a little bit at home, which we've talked about, and the as far as Hoosier Trapper Outdoors, the semi-live stuff from that is actually rolling. Now every few weeks we've had a few of our newer episodes from the semi-live, so check that out. But as far as that comparing to this, it's kind of night and day. You got your fundamentals are still and your baseline's still the same, but your thinking is a little different for sure.
Right.
But it's always fun. So with the market like it is, and southern fur not being as hot as what we could catch back at home, what did you have in mind with what we're doing with this catch, Charlie?
We'll probably sell some of the coyotes just to see. It's a semi-heavy at best. It's definitely a coyote that's not, in the top of demand at all. They're pretty rough coyotes.
Some of them make pretty cool wall hangers, and for personal appeal, they're a little darker, but still at least have a full coat and not rubbed. We did get rid of a few that were.
We had some mange issues.
Yeah, some mange. Definitely did a couple coyotes a couple favors there.
We had, it's, and then the cats, there was, 2011, 2012, whatever, 2013, we had cats that averaged good money down here, like $128 average on the cats. And then now they're down in the $30 to $50 range. So those basically we just have tanned and sell them in the shop. So do a little better that way. Plus, make something available to people that generally don't have that available to them. So
right. But either way, they're fun to catch.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean this is a recreational trip. This is obviously not a trip that's going to make any money to speak of. Somebody was giving me a hard time about making a trip like this, and we're spending way more than what we're getting in return, and it's like, well, yeah, but that's kind of the old way of thinking in my view on this recreational trapping. It's like, and I've said it before, some people go on fishing trips, some people go on hunting trips, some people go golfing.
No one's paying them to go do that.
So and that's all completely, you're paying for it, but there's no amount of return in that at all. So I look at this exactly the same way. It's part of the adventure, part of what you like to do. It's just that's the perspective. So
right,
and it is something you can still get some return on if you want. So, but
right, nothing goes to waste.
No.
Zach,
yes,
you caught your first animal. As we said, this is your first trip ever, but you connected on a bobcat. So, what was that like? Well, you didn't even know what to think.
It was cool. It was funny after catching the bobcat, and then I think I had 3 coyotes, so total 4 animals. And that first day, just catching the bobcat and then coyote, you guys were saying like, "Wow, that's good." And I have no perspective on how many animals you should catch or hope to catch, or what the good statistics are. But you guys told me that was a good day. I mean, it was exciting to see that first coyote, and then I didn't see the bobcat at first when you guys pulled up there, so I was kind of surprised when you guys said, "Hey, there's a cat in there," and it's pretty cool. I mean, especially, being new to it, and, maybe Jake saying, "Well, a couple trips I didn't catch anything." It's like, well, I hope I could get something being the first time. And it was just a good time. I was glad I could set some traps. I'd come down here mostly to film stuff, do video, and it was really good to get hands on. I mean, like I said, even filming at some of those other events and seeing demos and stuff like that, showing up here, I really didn't know anything. Even though I was videoing, it was like the focus was video, the focus was getting good shots. So to actually get hands-on, set traps, use the lures and the bait that you guys have, I mean, I don't think people realize how much goes into it. I think there was a lot more that I had to put into it than maybe what was thought in terms of location, what to set, how to set, and even the control with the gloves you guys were using. I think that was fascinating, just to separate those two things and how important it is exactly where the animal's going to be. And it was just cool to catch a couple animals first time out. And since I did catch them, I knew I wanted to skin something. I wouldn't feel like I was genuine in doing that if I would have just caught something and went home. So I learned how to skin a coyote. Very cool. All around, just a good trip. I really enjoyed hanging out, and hopefully the video stuff turned out well, and maybe you'll invite me back again.
You're a good instructor, right, Jake?
I guess so.
I was worried.
Jake helped you out setting those first sets there?
Since the first check day, we came up empty-handed. I was a little worried with the maybe the group that I showed up with, I wasn't quite sure.
That had more to do with the rain and the 40-mile-per-hour winds and that night. But.
Yeah, well, the first day we set traps, and the second, and then our first actual check day, we caught one possum. So that was.
You didn't have all your traps out, and I wasn't here to help.
Right, but we had enough out that we should have caught more than that. That was a pretty. That was. It's not unusual to have days where you don't catch, but usually your first night out, you'll catch something. But the night before we had 40-mile-per-hour winds and horizontal rain, and it was pretty rough. So, but it kicked in the next day. Right after that, I don't remember what the day was, but the next day was good. So
bobcat and a coyote for me. So the second check.
Yeah, we caught two cats that day. So yeah, it was it was good. So and then we had one day
midweek or whatever.
Midweek, and the whole day we only caught one possum. Is that right?
Yeah, it was the same as that first night, basically.
Yeah, one possum, and then the next day we caught 6 coyotes. So I mean, it's like. You have those days where you just are not going to catch something. Animals don't move.
It rained quite a bit. It wasn't a complete washout, but it was overcast.
It's kind of warm. You know,
it was real misty.
Yeah, made them kind of lazy, I think, or whatever. And then another front came through, and it cooled things off, and that really got them moving. So,
yeah.
One thing too, you can count on. And we've talked about it before. That full moon. I mean, you got full moon, and you're affected very drastically in catch. Animals are way more tentative if they're moving much at all. They don't want to work a set. That's been my experience. And as soon as you start losing that full moon, things kick in and it gets quite a bit better. So
we've seen multiple examples of that. Specifically, one that sticks in my mind is 2 seasons ago in New Mexico.
Yeah, that was drastic.
Yeah, that just shut off.
It's like the water turned off on us.
Yeah.
So with that being said, when you guys, whoever's listening, tune in to the Hoosier Trapper Season 9, definitely let us know what you think of what the film looks like. I'm sure Zach wants some feedback, some criticism, because it's gonna have a different look than what I'll be the one editing it still, but it's gonna have a different look to it. It's gonna have probably a little bit more B-roll and things like that. It's just hard for us to capture that when we're the ones actually trapping. So it definitely helps having an extra hand in here. And hopefully it's more enjoyable to watch and tells the story a little better, too, of us getting after it. So definitely want the feedback for sure, because I'm curious, too.
Well, we'll have to remind them again, because this is going to air very shortly, and we're talking 8 months before the first show comes out. So what we're filming now won't start showing until next August. So it will be a pretty big time lapse. So we'll ask for critique it again. So
I do think it's pretty safe to say that there's been more minutes of footage recorded on this trip than any other.
We filled up at
for sure.
128 gigabyte SD card just on the one camera alone. So there's plenty of footage there.
Justin's editing job significantly as well.
I don't know if this was a good idea or not.
The feedback will be good though. Once we see, what maybe they like, what went well, what could be improved on, it'd be, great to make sure if we need other equipment or film other things. It was a good opportunity to start with this and see, what went well and what you guys like, and hopefully just improve from there. Like I said, I really enjoyed being able to film stuff.
Justin brought some wax dirt, but he didn't have very much, which we ended up actually not really using it. And the ground here in most areas was fairly workable. Mm-hmm. And then some areas was just plain mud. So we did use some cover holes here. And cover holes are, it's a great cover. They don't freeze up. If it's super muddy, they're still a good trap cover. They do have their downside. You can't pack them in around your trap. You can't really bed in them. You can't bed in them. But they are an excellent trap cover, and we've used them for years. So the animals definitely like messing with them. Mm-hmm. Gray foxes and raccoons are the worst, I think. They just like the feel of them. They get in there and they start messing around with them. But we had couple scenarios where I think they created an issue. Well, actually, we didn't have a couple scenarios. We had this trip not so much because I don't think the gray foxes were around, but the typically the gray foxes and cover holes don't line up very well as far as. I mean, it's even worse with them working your set and getting hold of your trap and that kind of thing. But we went to as Justin mentioned, we went to the wax paper instead of the cover holes. Instead of the nylon trap pan covers. And then whenever we used the cover holes on this trip, we definitely tried to sift dirt over the top to blend better, and also to keep the cover holes from blowing off. The thing was that generally on this trip we were fortunate we didn't have to really use them that much. That was probably the biggest plus on this trip.
Yeah,
so.
I didn't use too many. I think I really limited myself as far as placement of it, so I was using it more inside the jaws of the trap.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still using the dirt that was there to help bed. But I showed up late on this trip. Some we haven't said that yet, but I showed up late. But the days that you guys started setting, I think you were dealing with a little more mud than what I was by the time I got down here.
Right.
I was at a funeral, and so I got down here 2 days after. So by the time that the soil had kind of dried out quite a bit, it wasn't too muddy on most locations where I could work the dirt.
Right. Last year it was so wet and so saturated you couldn't find dry dirt anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Up under.
Oh, it was terrible.
Yeah. Everything was soaked. But this year you could find dry dirt to cover with.
I mean, we didn't see the sun for a full
Yeah.
week or whatever.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
crazy.
that was rough.
Yeah.
It was miserable. But
One thing I want to talk about since Justin came down, then Justin made specific sets for bobcats. So, all fenced in, majorly fenced in, using Christmas tinsel for flagging.
I did that on probably 5 sets with the tinsel.
So none of them connected with anything. And that
Mm-mm.
the sets work. We already know they work because of using them elsewhere. But the question is, so that tinsel hanging down probably actually would have the reverse effect on a coyote. It probably is as gaudy as that is. It is would possibly spook a coyote. So if you're making those very specific bobcat sets, which would catch a gray fox, which would certainly catch a possum or a coon in a bobcat, you definitely need to have some other sets in that area that are more mainstay dirt hole or flat set
Right.
to pick up the coyotes. So the sets that are very species specific are just that. They're going to limit you to that particular catch. And I know when we were up with Mark Stack up on his snare line, he was very. And he would have he had 2 different GPSs. One that he would do for the general area, and then one he would have where he would actually go and hold it right next to the snare and make a point. So he knew, so he could locate his snares. Well, if he had used some flagging, some pink flagging or whatever, he could have found the snare easier than watching the GPS once he got into the area. But he was very
concerned that flag would shy those coyotes out.
Right. He was pretty adamant about that. So I guess the point of where I'm going with all this is those very specific bobcat sets are good for bobcats, but they're not really good for coyotes.
Right.
So it's definitely good to have a mix at your location. Or you can just go, what we normally do is sets that will work on all 3, fox, coyote, and bobcat. And then just kind of, stay more generalized. So you can't hardly make statements with without some sort of major study on all this. What we're talking about.
We need to do it 9 years, like we just, you know what I mean.
Right.
And I knew coming down here,
significant numbers of that particular type of set. You're going to need to put cameras on them. You're going to need to have all this,
log it and
So we're not going to make some sort of statement here.
I would definitely say that would be, a big part of coyotes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we really would have to log all that to know that.
Right. But I mean to say whether a standard set, flat set dirt hole was more productive or less productive for a bobcat than a specific bobcat set. It would be real interesting.
Oh, yeah. That part of it.
And I don't know. Different. I don't know that. I don't know that you can safely say it one way.
Be careful with your words now, Charlie. We're going to get some hate mail.
I mean, you can always jump to conclusions, and you can always say, okay, I've had success with this set, but in the same scenario, would have the standard set produced the same result? So
right, you'll never really know.
So this is something for everybody to think about. Anyways, it's just I'm just throwing this out there. It's
great. It's a great conversation
and
piece.
In a scientific study or anything that's in research, it's very, very controlled and everything's the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so, from that perspective, that would be very, very difficult to duplicate in the wild, because you're talking about of so many different variables, and you're also talking about while wild animals are all pretty much instinctively the same, they do have some level of varying personalities too. Mm-hmm. So you got all those factors and all those variables that would go into that, and then you got to say, okay, would have this set done just as well as the one that was specifically for a cat?
Exactly. So was he already coming by there, or did he see that flag way down the lane and grab his eye?
Right.
Or you're only catching cats in that set because everything else is just shied away from that anyways.
Right.
So it's
right.
I knew that making the sets. Like I said, I knew me coming down a little behind. We've been catching coyotes at home, so I was in cat mode. I wanted to catch a cat, and I was looking up stuff online about cats and just getting excited about it because we still don't have a season in Indiana. So I definitely made more than probably I ever have, which is funny because I set less traps.
Right. I mean, proportionally, yeah, you had.
I mean, I hemmed them in pretty good with some brushy. I've tried to force, say, if a cat were to come in, I tried to force them to the front of the trap. There's no coming in from the side. I didn't give them that option. So the flag was to get them there in front of there. And then from there, the smell of, to bring them in, top dog and finicky feline, bobcat urine, the stuff we sell there. That was the idea behind that. Because I knew we'd catch coyotes too. But then as far as the flagging goes, we don't do too much of it. We did play a lot in New Mexico. I remember picking up a couple cats on the flag. Remember that big saddle that we set, and it went up around that big rock up the. That one's always stuck out to me because it was such a vast area out. Even the saddle of the two mountains coming down was so wide. Was that cat hugging that edge in the first place, or was he on the other side and saw that flag? Things like that. Just
right.
So that was my whole approach with it on this trip.
Right.
But,
right. I mean, you would have to do that. Several years, 100 different trail cameras. I mean, it would just have to be
very serious,
extensive to start saying concretely that this set's going to catch significantly more numbers than just a standard set. I mean, when you come down to it,
if I was going to pick one set to ever make traditional dirt hole, I mean, you cannot.
Yeah.
You really can't go wrong.
I mean, you might want to throw in the flat set too as your kind of your territorial set.
For sure.
But
if you're trapping heavy in one area and that coyote or whatever it is that comes by sees the same kind of,
right,
change it up, make it flat.
Right.
I made a walk-through rub set. I don't never make those.
Right.
I did it this year just because for one, I couldn't get a hole in for where we were. It was so rocky on that trail. So and there was a big rock there, and I just made a walk-through flat set.
Right.
Kind of like a rub deal.
Or if you're
Just trying to work with what was available, and I knew you had the other end covered down the lane. You had a dirt hole. So that's always good when we work in pairs like that.
Right. We don't snare. I mean, that's another thing when we're on public ground and you got potential dog hunters or whatever, which we didn't occasionally have in the past. We haven't this year. We don't do any snaring on National Forest ground. Just out. It's legal. You have to be so many yards off the road. It's legal, but we just don't
It's
do it.
not worth the hassle.
Yeah, we just don't want some sort of. You can let a dog out of a foot trap. A snare is a different story if the hunter's not right with the dog or whatever. So we just don't snare. But that snaring option is obviously great for picking up those animals that may not want to work a traditional flat set dirt hole or whatever. So it's like our buddy Mark says, Mark Stack. I referred to him already once, but he says coyotes were born scared. So they're just so you can say wary / just incredibly scared, and that's just the nature of that animal, and you need all your options going for you,
Mm-hmm. Since we're on the topic of set making, outside of those bobcat sets, I don't do heavy fencing, but Jake, you do quite a bit of fencing on each side of the.
Yeah, on each side.
But you like to leave the front open.
Yeah, I'll say, I'm making a cat specific set, and I may put a stick in the front, but typically I don't. But yeah, stick on each side. I've got plenty of coyotes. Like I said, It's hard to say concrete evidence one way or the other, but
Right.
Yeah.
Were you doing heavy fencing, Charlie, at all, or just leaving it pretty?
I was pretty much wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very no fencing.
Yeah.
So I think you can safely say, after all the experience, coyotes don't like a lot of fencing. They don't like any. They don't like to be forced or whatever. So I think we can say that. I'm going to say that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that.
And I wouldn't say mine were heavily, heavily fenced.
Right, because we're talking small sticks for a square for a cat to step in.
Yeah,
and the coyotes still go in those.
Right. Well, it just kind of makes me think back when we first came down here, and I feel like some of the stuff that you can get by with down here for the type of coyotes here, what they're used to being in on this big timber and brush all the time, versus what we have in our farm fields back at home. I feel like you can get by with some crazier stuff down here, because that one year, Jake made some sort of.
I was young and
It was up like on the side of this hill, and he had piled up reindeer moss like in this half circle, and it was big. It was made for a cat, really.
A fairly steep side of a road too.
Yeah, I mean it was. You were looking for a bobcat, and sure enough, a coyote. He didn't care. He got right in and in all that.
That was my first double on coyotes.
Now I'll always remember that. And just always struck me like, man, I don't know if you could get by catching a coyote back at home and something like that, but stranger things have happened.
Right, and I will say there's exceptions for everything. There's always the exception, but the general rule would say that was not a coyote set for sure.
Oh, and I would very much agree to that. Now, looking back on that,
yeah. So while we're talking about sets, I'm gonna talk about traps for a second. So it's been a few seasons and we've gone exclusively to the MB550s, and I, other than being a little heavy paying attention for a gray fox, I really can't say anything negative about that trap. All the coyotes we were caught except for one they were buried in that trap.
They weren't going anywhere.
Right. We caught one by toes, and I'm not sure what was up with that. It still held him. He was still there. But they were all in that trap. They were all fully committed. They're easy to set. That pan clicks into place. I mean, it's done for you.
It's very rare that we have issues with the trap after a catch.
Right.
We did have one where the dog did get slightly bent, but that was no big deal.
Right.
9 times out of 10, you can reset that bad boy and just keep going.
Right.
A lot of the other traps in the market, maybe not so much unless they have some sort of modification to them. Usually dogs are bent or
We used a lot of number 2 bridgers back in the day, and that's a good trap. I can't.
Yeah. But man, did we have to hammer those dogs flat?
Yeah. Basically, every coyote you would catch, you would have to be hammering the dog out flat.
Yeah.
They'd bend them up for sure.
But it's a reliable trap, though.
It's a good trap. It's a good trap.
It just requires a little more TLC. But
and then with the posi trip on the 550 posi trip style pan, you don't have to worry about pan tension. The upward pressure of the jaw is what puts that pressure on. Puts that pan tension on there. So, they're 2.5 to 3 pounds. I think there's some that are considerably more than that. I don't know.
Everyone I've tested has been over 3.5 to 4.
Yeah,
and I think I've never seen anything that they put out, but I've always heard they were like 2.5 or 3 out of the box.
Yeah,
which would be, I think, better.
It's perfect for a coyote trap.
But when you throw in the grays in there, it would be nice to have them down a little bit. We could take the time to adjust them, but I don't know if it would.
You got to bend the dog, and I just.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really worth it. I mean,
then you got a bent dog.
Yeah. Once they bend them once, they're going to bend again. It's probably the same spot.
So Zach, you don't have a baseline, but you obviously picked up on setting that trap pretty easily. It was not.
Bending it in.
Yeah, I think you guys telling me at the beginning of the trip, this is the Cadillac of traps. It was like, well, maybe this is easier than some other traps, but without a baseline, I mean, they seem pretty straightforward to set, and I did think it was interesting. You guys talking about about how you set up the traps based on how they were in the ground, the way they were facing, what twigs you put around it. I would have never thought that was part of catching a specific animal. I just thought it was you'd set them all the same and you kind of get what you get. But then to think about just you guys talking about the gray foxes maybe not being able to set those off as easily. There's another thing I would have never really thought about, that you got a specific trap for a certain type of animal. But back to you guys saying that it pretty good for many different animals, and it was an easy trap to set. I mean, like you said, it's a nice trap, and I don't have any baseline, but if I were to buy some to catch something, that'd be the one I'd get.
It's interesting at the shop or through online we sell some coyote trapping package kits. So they got everything you need to go out and catch coyotes. Instructional DVD, all the tools, the whole thing, everything you need. You don't have to buy anything else. And we've got 2 options. We've got a kit with a number 2 bridger, and then we have a upgrade option to a 550 where of course you got to pay more money for that. And this is the first year that we've offered the 550 option, and we have far and above. We sell way more of the 550 option than we do the bridger. And I think from the standpoint of a beginner, it's a very good choice on their part, just because it's an easier trap. They don't have to adjust it. It's ready to go out of the box. So I think it's a good decision on their part. So whether you're a beginner or a very experienced trapper, it's an excellent trap to use. So like I said, I'm not slighting the bridger at all because we use those for years and it's a great trap. Mm-hmm. But it's a trap where you get a lot of trap for your money. You get a lot of bang for your buck on a bridger, for sure. Is
it common that you would have only one trap with you on the trip? I mean, I was a little surprised when we started pulling them out and every single one was the exact same. It's only the 550. That's what we have. That's what we're going to use. Is that common for you to only use that one kind? Because it definitely made it easier for me to know this is the same trap that I've set in the last area. This is what I'm going to keep setting, and got used to that. Are you trying to get a bunch of different animals with different traps, or is it common to have that one?
Well, there's no perfect multi-species trap, but this one I think covers the most bases. So, like I said, it's not great for gray foxes, but overall, it is a good across the board trap. We used to run all kinds of traps. We used to have probably 4 or 5 different kinds of traps. 1 3/4 Sleepy Creeks, number 2 bridgers,
number 3 Sleepy Creeks,
number 3 Sleepy Creeks, some number 3 Victors. We had some 1.75 Victors, and then we started running some 550s. And basically, and I was kind of like, I don't want all your eggs in one basket. Keep, and then we just kind of got to the point where the 550s were really performing the best. And I don't like working on traps. I don't like sitting there with 100 and some traps, and you got to go through and mess with them all and get them all adjusted. And some people love that, and that's fine. But I don't. So with the 550, it's good to go out of the box, and it's Cadillac anyways. And and I think just from the consistency standpoint, what to do every time you go set a trap. So,
well, you talked earlier about the baseline of how long you'd have to wait for the type of sets maybe Justin had to see how effective it was. I think it also helps. I mean, you got a good baseline. If every single trap's the same, you're not saying, oh, we should have set this kind of trap here, we should have set this kind of trap here.
Right.
It's a pretty, you could say controlled, that it's the same trap, it's relatively the same pan tension. That is consistent throughout the whole thing, so that, I guess, isn't a place that you have to guess throughout the trap line.
Right. I know that, we asked Andy Weiser the same question.
I was just thinking of that.
Yeah, and Andy says, just give me a trap. And if you watch Andy on, he'll put a lot of stuff on Facebook, and he's using all kinds of traps. So he's using long springs and coil springs, and it's like, just give me a trap. He's
make
not
it work.
That dedicated to one particular trap. I think he was one of the Montgomerys or something he was kind of partial to but in general he's just kind of all over the place, and obviously he's a very successful trapper and spends a lot of time in the field, so.
Well, when you break it down and just in its simplest form, it's always about the location and and proper pan tension, and you can do that with any trap,
right?
So
right.
What about choosing a trap based on the terrain? I mean, would you come into Arkansas and realize that there was snow or other scenarios that a different trap would be better, or is that pretty standard as any condition this trap's going to work? Or is it, I mean, this trap's going to work because we've been to Arkansas before, we know this is a good trap, it's going to set up well? Is there much difference in that based on terrain or different landscape?
Not so much. Some guys are going to say, well, if it's freezing up, then you need to go to 4 coils and all that. But I'm going to stay away from that discussion.
Oh,
because I've stated my position on that before. Because
what you guys were talking about possibly when we had to use the cover holes, what if we used dirt and it froze? Is that just common across all traps, or is that a reason? Because
that's an issue with any trap. So
yeah, you would use something other than the dirt, like coveralls, wax dirt, or peat moss, or salt, or something to help with the elements that are going on. But as far as the actual trap itself would be the same. Which is funny, you talk about that, different places, different traps. It's fairly common. I don't know if it's just something is how it always was and it just stuck longer, but it always seems like a lot of guys out west are big fans of long springs, and that you don't see a lot of long spring trappers in the Midwest or out east.
Right.
You got something to say with that, Charlie? Something that could elaborate on
that? Long springs are certainly very traditional, and they're got tremendous holding power. So for the states where they don't have to check every day, they got a lot of holding power there. They're not going to be accidentally. You can't. A trap with levers on it could be,
accidentally pried up against something and release a lever.
Get some rocks or whatever, where that's not going to happen with a long spring.
That's true.
Generally in those areas, too, that it's super dry out there, so a lot of times they don't have to worry about them freezing down. There is a lot of surface area there to freeze down, but they also got that.
So there's less
that
to worry about with
the
that.
The bottom of the spring could freeze down, but the top may not.
Yeah.
Whereas on the lever on a coil springs could freeze down and not operate, whereas the bottom of the long spring could freeze down, but the top would still be operational, which would pull that bottom spring up. So
then you throw in the idea or the possibility of catching bigger game like bears, mountain lion, wolves out that way, out west. So that would all kind of make sense.
So of course they, probably a lot of those guys prefer those mountain lions and those bears not be sitting in the trap when they get there, But
yeah, maybe they should stick with the smaller traps so they can get out.
Yeah, if they got to turn them loose, which I know they got to turn the bears loose, and in some cases got to turn the mountain lions loose too. So, but yeah, that. But they do have it's a slower trap, but they got tremendous holding power, a long spring. So,
good question, Zach.
Yeah. Well, the other thing was thinking about, all the gray foxes that we kind of theorized were there that may have set it off, flipped the trap over. I think it's just, I don't know if it's fascinating, but cool for us to stand there and theorize, where the animal was, maybe what it was doing, what it might do the next time. And I think it all goes back this year, getting my first deer and really just noticing the patterns or trying to figure out, what they're doing, how they're moving is fun to do, cool to do, and to see you guys do that without trail cameras. I mean, if you had a trail camera, for sure, like, hey, what was there, which way they're moving. But pretty fascinating just for us to kind of theorize. And Justin, say he saw a track over here or, saw this was rubbed up. It was really cool to see that side of it, because a lot of people, just, sure, the trap's clear, let's move on. But that side of it and thinking about what may have happened the night before, I mean, that's cool to be a part of and just learn more about it. It's one thing to know you missed something, but to think this is maybe what happened, this is how we can catch it tomorrow, that was really cool.
That's certainly the case with gray fox. I mean, their curiosity,
it'll eventually get them.
Yeah, I mean, that one spot you were having issues with it a little bit. What was that, a year ago or the year before that maybe? I think it came 3 different times to that set.
Assuming it was the same one. And it probably was.
And finally got him.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, one of my traps, it was flipped over 2 days in a row. And if you guys weren't kind of coaching me along, like, hey, this is most likely what happened or it could have happened, and just, been like, what the heck happened? Why is it laying out in the middle? I mean, for us to pull up there and you guys be like, oh, it's flipped out again. It's
roll.
cool.
They're big rubbers. They like to roll on stuff and rub their sides of their face on stuff. And if you do watch them on night, like trail cam night footage, they're
catty,
kind of feline acting. Yeah.
Well, to see that one of the traps was flipped completely over on its face and not be set off, I was just impressed by
it could have been a coon. Coons
what
are notorious
could have
about
done
doing
that
too.
and,
Yeah.
And just kind of a weird phenomenon to see that it wasn't set up, but there's a hole dug there and the trap's laying upside down. I mean, that's kind of cool.
And that's kind of, if you're just sitting in dirt, you could pack that dirt around the trap, get all that done, which we typically, with cover holes or whatever, you can't do that. You might be able to eliminate some of that stuff, but gray foxes and coons still are kind of bad about that. So,
what are you gonna do with that? Your big catches there, Zach.
I was a little worried that since Charlie was gonna say that he wanted to take them and sell. So I was. It's funny. I told Jake when I got the Bobcat. I kind of whispered in his ear. I was like, "Do you think you'll let me keep it? It's kind of small." And it's just cool to be able to. Probably gonna tan and hang up those first catches. I mean, that's cool, just kind of as a marker and a memory of doing this. And it's just cool. I mean, I don't even think I anticipated that I was going to set traps coming down here. So to be able to set, I think I counted today like 13. To be able to do that alongside doing the video was cool. I mean, like I said, just thinking I was going to do video, I didn't think I was going to get real deep into it. But it was more exciting to get on the trap line to think I had some traps and something out there that would get something. So definitely, get them tanned and hang them up on the wall, and hopefully get some more to hang with them.
We got one more question for you,
sure.
Zach. Do you think this trip, and after being around fur takers and seeing what we do and talking to Jacob a lot, you think you might trap yourself? Like go home and maybe trap the farm or something a
Yeah.
little bit on your own?
I think I would. And once again, it goes back to there was so much I didn't know. I felt like I'd been around it doing the video stuff. I'd seen a lot of demos, and I just didn't realize how much I wasn't paying attention when I was filming. So to know now, all the stuff that you guys know and have done for a long time, and even the stuff you guys use. It's like Top Dog and all the lures. We see that it worked. I'll definitely use some of that stuff. I see plenty of coyotes at the farm. So, but yeah, I think I'll keep doing it, and hopefully get invited back again for
I don't know.
another
I
trip.
don't know. We'll have to wait till the critique comes out from our fan base.
That is true. Well, although I think we can lock in another trip though because of the feedback. If we get good feedback on how we can improve, just and being outdoors. I love doing that video stuff, and it's just been cool to be around it all week and hang out with you guys.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good time.
It's been fun.
Just a good trip.
It was.
Charlie, you want to, before we end this, you might want to mention where we might be going next or what we're trapping next? You want to throw that out there? Or is that a big secret? I don't know.
No, I guess
here in about a week maybe or so?
we're probably going to go do some muskrat trapping at home in Indiana. And then
Which would be fun.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to some water.
Kayak trapping muskrats, so that's something, And then we will probably tentatively going to Tennessee in
If things
February.
work out, yeah.
So we'll see how that works out, and just go from there. But yeah, kind of looking forward to that muskrat thing, assuming the weather stays, so we don't have to deal with freeze up. So
Yeah.
so far it's been mild.
We tried to do that last year, and it just the
every
weather
time,
was it just wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. The best time to go do that trip, it's just super busy at work, and we can't really make that happen.
Right.
So we make it work with what we got. So any concluders, guys? Anybody? Anything? Wrap this puppy up.
I was just glad I caught something. That made the trip a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, we were glad to have you, and I'm glad you caught something too. And it's one of those things where this learning curve, you get to the point where you feel pretty comfortable going out trapping, and you feel pretty comfortable that you can have success, and you get fairly comfortable that what you're doing is pretty much right. And then after that point, you just continue to adjust off of that. There might be small adjustments or whatever. And then you just gradually continue to learn off of what you've already learned, both through mistakes and through successes. And as you gain your level of experience, then that definitely affects how you continue to do things. And sometimes you see people and you'll be doing a demo, or you watch a demo or whatever, and then you think and the guy's got some really good points in the demo, whoever's doing it. And the question is, do you still go back and do the same old stuff that you fell into this rut that you're continuing to do, or are you taking those suggestions and incorporating them into what you're doing and giving them a try? And I'm not saying to go out and just start make up some whole new set and just whatever, but of course I don't even know what that would be, but
Probably something that wouldn't work.
Yeah. So yeah.
Otherwise, it'd be done.
So my point is, I guess there's always something to learn. It doesn't matter how many years you've been doing it. There's always something to learn, and that's what makes this a pretty cool thing to do. Because there's always some sort of challenge or some new thing that you're going to run into or whatever. So, but
Jake, you got anything special? Jake's falling asleep over there on the bed. This is a late night
I'm not falling
podcast
asleep.
for us.
I'm checking for bed bugs. But yeah, no, I'm just had a real good trip. It was nice to be in some little warmer climate.
Yeah.
The weather was awesome. The sights were awesome.
Today was great.
Beautiful weather.
Yeah.
No, great trip.
Yep. The only thing I got to add is Happy New Year, and keep sharing us on social media. Go to our YouTube and subscribe, all that good stuff for Hoosier Trapper Outdoors and the podcast. All the support we can get would be much appreciated. And please join National Trappers Association, Fur Takers of America, your local chapter, anything. We need all the help we can get out in the field. So we'll catch you on the next one.
Can I say something real quick about that?
Yeah, go.
I can get on my soapbox for a minute.
You do it.
So you got a handful of people that are basically carrying the weight of everybody else.
I know. When you hear the numbers, it's like shattering.
It's terrible. And we are under so much scrutiny and so much pressure from the antis, pressure in a number of different states. Last year it was considerable. And since I'm on the board of Fur Takers, I hear a lot more than probably generally most people do.
Right.
There are way more things working against us than for us in some respects. We got a lot going for us too. But I can't say enough that you need to be involved. You don't even have to be involved. Just be a member, so so you're showing your support. And if you don't know what to do or whatever, just at least join an association. And I can't say how important that is. And I run into people, and it just goes right through me.
Mm-hmm.
People that are my age that got more than, their kids are growing and they've got more money than they got plenty of money. They can afford a $40 membership, and they just won't join. They just don't. Yeah. And they've been trappers all their life. It's like, how important is that to you? So with that said, I don't want to make anybody mad, but with that said,
those are fighting words.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to be a member of an association. If you want to see the future of this, if you want to see your kids and grandkids be able to continue to do this, you are going to have to be. And we've got everything on our side. We got biologists, we got all the scientific support, we got all the reasons for this. But there are still so many people working against us, wanting this to end. I cannot express how important it is to be a member of an association.
Yeah.
Fur Takers of America, National Trapper Association, Sportsman's Alliance. They're all good. All good. So
if you don't know how to help, just join. That's plain and simple.
Exactly.
And if you're a outdoorsman that stumbled on this podcast that doesn't trap or just thought it was interesting, just help out your fellow trappers, because at the end of the day, we're the first line of defense. We've said that numerous times. So they usually start with us and try and work their way up the ladder. And next thing you know, they're after hunting. And
they're after hunting a lot too, but nothing like trapping. And I will say, if you're a hunter or an outdoorsman and you don't specifically trap and you don't want to specifically join a trapping organization, support Sportsman's Alliance, because they're across the board.
They do such a great job too.
Yeah, they're politically connected. So
we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you down the road.
All right, I want to clarify a couple things that I said during the podcast. To be honest, we filmed this podcast 10 o'clock at night after I'd driven for 12 hours, and I just want to make sure that it's understood that in the scenario that we were in, the comparison of a specific bobcat set with a dirt hole or flat set, and the likelihood of one being more successful than the other. In that scenario, where specific bobcat sign is very difficult to see, and we're basing locations on bobcat catches from past history. The debate or the question in my mind is, are we actually hurting ourselves with specific bobcat sets in terms of catching other species? And that was the reason behind the idea that would you be just better off with a dirt hole or a flat set instead of a specific bobcat set, and that a bobcat set would spook other animals and it would be So the idea that you would have to have multiple sets at a location, which we typically do, that would not spook a coyote or an animal that would be more wary. So in the scenario of if you're out west and you're trapping in the canyons and up on the rock bluffs and that kind of thing, where it would be specifically for bobcats, that generally the coyotes are not going to be in those locations, then those gaudy, flashy bobcat sets would be very appropriate. And but in the general scenario that we were in, that was what I was referring to. So it's just something to think about, and I'm not writing anything in stone. I rarely do, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind and something to think about, and just kind of give some thought to. So with that said, that's kind of want to clarify that. And I was joking. Coyotes, generally, you don't want to guide them very much. If you do, it's got to be really subtle, maybe with some dirt clods or just a rock or something strategically placed where they don't feel like they're hemmed in or being guided to step into the trap. So, guiding is fine for coyotes, but it's got to be very subtle. We'll put it that way. So, and not like you would be guiding for a bobcat, which they'll guide just fine. So they're not going to shy away from that. So I just wanted to clear that up. One thing I want to add here at the end too is when we get emailed questions on standard email or hit on Messenger on Facebook or whatever, we do the very best we can to answer all of those, and sometimes it might take me a few days to get to them because we get a lot of them, and I more than appreciate it, and I welcome them, and I want them to continue, but just bear with me. Sometimes it takes me a while to get to them. So anyways, I appreciate everybody sending those questions in, and certainly we're appreciating all the photo contest entries as well. So anyways, I just wanted to add that to the podcast and kind of clarify that, and hope you enjoyed the podcast.